I'll be back. Okay. Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome to another session of the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute's Symposium, Filaments of the Atlantic Heritage. We are happy to have you on board for this special session. We have lots of different sessions, but this one here, of course, because of the day that we are commemorating, which is World Poetry Day, is really significant. And we want to welcome each and every one of you. Want to thank the 6 poets and our literary critic, Vamberto Freitas, for taking time to be present on this event. We want to thank all of you who are attendees here on Zoom, and all of you who are following us right now on social media through Facebook Live. So we have José Raposo, by the way, on there, but José, you have your camera turned off. So you need to turn your camera on so we can see you. And the rest of us, we can see everybody's smiling faces. It is a wonderful springtime day here in California, but the best time for the valley, right, Sam? It's the springtime until it gets really hot. And hopefully the weather's good in New York, Scott.
Very good. Beautiful day, 60 degrees.
Oh, sunny. Wow. And Massachusetts, Logan, how are things there?
About the same as New York. Can't complain. Very
sunny. Good. And in British Columbia.
Muita chuva.
Muita chuva. Oh, mas chove sempre. It's always rain, so it's nothing new.
I think they just say that so that we won't all move there because it's so beautiful there. But oh, it's raining all the time.
Ok, José, agora já estás, mas estás em silêncio. Retira-me essa coisa daí. Okay, yeah, unmute yourself. Jose, you're on mute. We will not be able to hear you. Okay, so thank you all for joining us. We will be reading some poetry. We want to thank all of these poets for agreeing to be here in a very informal setting, as poetry readings should be. And there's no particular order, but I just looked at the list here. And since Lara has probably the best background in the world, of the beautiful island of Flores, we're going to start with Lara. And what says name, as for those of you following us, we'll have each one of the poets read one of their works. They can tell us a little bit about how the poem came about, and it's always an interesting take for those of us watching and following. And then we'll go around every single person, and Scott is going to read from his new book, it's a longer poem, so he will read it all in one. It wouldn't make sense to break it, and so he'll be the last of the first session and the first of the second session. And then at the end, we'd like to have some conversation about the Azores, about your poetry, about literature, about poetry in general, and these Azorean connections. Okay. And of course, we'll hear from Vamberto as well. So, Lara, would you please start? Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to start. Well, Elaine actually gave me a couple of poems that were her favorites that I could read. And actually, I'm going to, I have 2 of those poems, Elaine. And it fits right into the Azorean Sea and Flores Island. As you see in the background, this is the island where my grandfather came from. However, my mother's side came from Pico, and my father's side came from Fayal as well. So I even think sometimes I might have a cousin in Elaine, but we haven't figured that out yet. Anyway, this poem is about my grandfather's immigration, but it's a story, and there's some fantasy in it, and it's not a true story. Actually, this grandfather had a stepfather in Fazazina, where I think he was from, and the stepfather was mean to him. So he came over to, when he was a teenager, he jumped a ship and he got over to New Bedford, and from there came to California and met my grandmother during the gold rush. So there you go. Flores Island, the place at the beginning. Remember, this is fantastical as well as halfway true. The place at the beginning, a wail rises up in her mind, turning her thoughts gray. In port, the ferry of return, she searches for her grandfather to discover the shape of his immigration and finds the planks gone, rotted. At the mercy of rough water and high winds, he rode, sinews, pulling his dory, pulling his bones to breaking. She scans the distance, says his name out loud, Antonio Enriquez, waits to hear a voice, see a face. She searches for all the prisoners of thick mists, others who look like her, whose foreign tongues speak music to her soul. Beyond the wake of a rogue wave, currents and tides ride on the back of a gray whale. She sees through the vapor boats whose nets gather the sky and let go. Fog falls, bearing dazed souls back to their home place. She falls with them. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lara. Thank you so much. It's a beautiful poem. Sam Pereira.
Okay. I've put this first poem in the new book that just came out called True North and Untrue You. And many of my poems don't have a connection to my Portuguese ancestry, but this one does. It's called Amanhã. And I've mentioned before that I think, as you know, as Portuguese words go, for a non-speaker like me, it's one of those words I glommed onto really early, and I find it absolutely beautiful, and I still do. In the case of this poem, I end up naming an imaginary daughter Amanhã. Years ago, while staring at a plate of sardines in what passed for a winter sun, the old thoughts returned. How on numerous occasions, under the direction of a bass guitar, my head filled with a darkness even Melville might have envied. I had walked the perimeters of this small town most of my life, sometimes knowing that cars might come out of nowhere, sounding horns, the split second before ending my lusts for a scotch in the night. I thought about the anguish some saw in being alone. I picked one particular evening, face dashed with the blood of my follies, and just sat on a curb, dreaming about making love with the sea. Her salt and infinitely wet glances bouncing off my forehead and off into the after breeze we'd shared there. If I had been lucky, if I'd seen the clouds as the ocean's gray mascara, designed to wear me down and take me, I might have been okay with that. I might have said in a slumber of love that she, my beloved Pacific, had given me a daughter, Amanhã, wearing the haunting silver of sardines.
Fantastic. One of my favorite poems from a new book. I guess there's quite a few favorites, but that's one of them. Elaine.
This one is called Grandmother's Embroidery.
Oh,
Grandmother's Embroidery. In full bloom, grandmother's blue hydrangea tumbles through space, shining, alone, overturned, while grandpa's boat beckons with sails of gold, dancing on a white blue sea. She's done it, broken the patterns, made something original, found American threads so brilliant she can capture Azorean light. In the Azores, we call it luz insular, a light so particular it floats, promising miracles, as if only somewhere else will relieve 1,000 deprivations. Luz insular should tell the truth, like grandmother's embroidery. If you leave, you may discover yourself tumbling, overturned, out of proportion, alone, yet able, stitch by stitch, to make Azorean light dance.
Very well. I love the imagery. Oh my. Well done. Well done, Elaine. And next we're going to turn to José Raposo.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, it's good afternoon here. And thank you, Denise, for inviting me. And if I am allowed, I would like to send a special abraço muito grande para o Vamberto.
Obrigado.
Todas as vezes que vejo São Miguel, nós encontramos. I had no idea that I could write poems in English, although I learned English and French back home. And until I started to translate a poem that I wrote from Portuguese to English, that I said, wait a minute, why am I translating this? Why don't I write in English? And here is one. What made me write this poem that I'm going to recite, and to which I give the name of Longing. It's a feeling that every immigrant has. We left our homeland, but we still want in our yards the kale, the fava beans, the hydrangeas, and even the canaries. Yes, years ago I brought from the Azores legally 10 wild canaries. When we look at our yards, the saudade takes us back home without leaving the place where we are. The happiness of being called Portuguese in America neutralizes the sadness of being called American in my homeland when I go back. Here is the poem. Yanked by a desire for better living and riding the wings of destiny, I left. I will never forget the trilling of the wild canary or the whistle of the blackbird, the variegated color of the hydrangeas dividing the green fields, or the multicolored azaleas in the parks and gardens, the gentle waves kissing the black sandy beaches, or the fury of the surf pounding on the volcanic shores of the island. Thousands of miles away, wearing out the leather soles of my adulthood, I long for the basaltic cobblestones of my youth, where so many times I left the skin of my feet.
Very nice. Very well.
Mm.
And
Thank you.
Logan.
nice.
Righty. So this first poem that I'm bringing to you today is a version of that was originally published by the Tribuna Portuguesa in collaboration with the PBBI, one of the initiatives of PBBI. And naturally, since its original publication, I've revisited it many times, and it's evolved and gone through this process of metamorphosis that at least for me, is one of the most joyful parts of being a writer. You get to see the poems that we write evolve and grow, almost like they were our own children. The poem in its current state does still maintain the original title, which is My Statue. And I should mention that the newest version of the poem is forthcoming in the upcoming number of Gavia Brown. So I'm very excited for that. This poem is an act of homage to an Azorean man who is the lifeblood of my Portugueseness and my Azorianidad. He is the reason that I ever picked up my first Portuguese textbook, and he is the reason that I am here today. This particular poem was actually birthed out of a mix of memories from my time that I spent living in Lisbon. Oftentimes on a rainy day, I would sit outside my apartment building, or I'd go for a stroll through what seems like thousands of praças that exist in Lisbon, and just people watch and be and exist. So the poem takes us through a simultaneous scene, really, of one of those rainy day strolls that mixes the reality of what I was seeing with the memories and the thoughts that I was simultaneously reflecting upon and experiencing in my mind. So without further ado, the title is My Statue. Rain pelts the cobblestone calçada. A utopia turns to a war zone. Tourists scatter. I walk, knowing all too well the dangerous potential of a slick calçada. Some of them slip. Now they know. Walking, thinking, unperturbed by the hail of crossfire in which I'm caught. I lift my head to see a statue. I stop, my eyes examining its unique character. It stands firm, the quintessence of gallantry, completely untouched by the bombardment letting loose on the city. All else assumes a deep gray despondence, battered by the bombs that fall from the clouds. The streets are barren, a wasteland. But the statue stands unscathed. Only light shines on this singular obra prima, perfectly guarded in a safe corner of the universe. A man stands chiseled out of the finest marble. His eyes look directly at me, no one else. Below him, a plaque. Ocean crosser, storm braver, fearless warrior. Who could it be? A hero to the people? A national figure? The sacred one-eyed man? No. This is no ordinary statue. This one is only mine. I continue walking, still thinking. I still see a statue. My statue. My avô. The corners of my mouth raise nearly to my ears at the sight of my statue, and the rain clears. Tourists emerge from their hideaways, some still rubbing their bruises, their selfies one shade darker now. But my statue remains unscathed. It guides me through the war zone, a beacon amidst broom, so that when others run and sometimes slip, I walk and think of my statue, when life sacrificed so much so that I may not fear the rain, and that I may turn my war zone into utopia.
I,
Very well. Very well. Very well. Thank you, Logan. Amazing. And we're going to turn to Scott. And Scott will tell us a little bit about what he's going to read, which poem he's going to read from his magnificent new book.
Yes, thank you, Denise, and thank you for inviting me. This is a wonderful honor to be amongst all of you and reading poetry on World Poetry Day. It's also, ironically, International Forest Day. So when you think about the book of poems that you have in your hands, think about the forest that it came from. I thought I would read, with that in mind, section 2 of Azorean Suite, which is why I'm getting sandwiched in the middle here, because it's really longer than a poem, a single poem. This book was a love letter to the Azores, which is and some of the explanation of my Azorean background is in this section of the poem that I'll read. And it's divided into 4 sections, as a suite should be, and each section is distinct thematically, but it's also connected to the others. And I'm exploring my connections to the island, specifically of San Miguel, but also Azoreanness overall. But also going a little bit further, given my background in environmental work, thinking about climate change impacts on the island, and thinking about how the island became populated both by species. The wonderful hydrangeas that we love came from somewhere else, and but have become identified with the island. So it sort of talks about what it means to be Azorean as well. So this is section 2 of Azorean Suite. Standing before Ponta Delgada's city gates, I wonder how my great-grandparents felt when they passed through one last time to board separate emigrant ships, the Peninsular and the Romanic, 1 month apart in 1906. It was early spring, and they would never see their island home again. My main approaches to the island have been by air, over the ocean from New York. First, sighting Santa Maria and then San Miguel, or by small tourist boats, whale watching off the southern coast or touring the north. My great-grandmother, Ana Rodriguez Castillo, was 14 years old when she left, along with her parents and siblings. My great-grandfather, Jose Rodriguez Castillo, was 19 years old and left his entire family in Foz de Cima for America. The dock is the only hope of men with no goodbye. Longitude and isolation. The slow-moving seafloor spreading along the mid-Atlantic ridge, which runs from Iceland to Tristan da Cunha. The Azores, where 3 continental plates come together and drift away, causing constant tectonic disturbance. These volcanic islands share no land with continents or each other. Only the wind and sea brought life to the islands, flora and fauna, and its people, all immigrants from elsewhere. Only those organisms resilient enough to cross the ocean could call the islands home. Only those resilient enough to survive could take hold, make a life here, prosper. Only the strong survive and thrive. Steep-sided volcanic islands surrounded by sea and very little shelf, causing cold upswelling currents deep from the ocean floor that meet warm waters from the Gulf Stream, making for nutrient-rich seas perfect for feeding sperm whales and other marine life. While far above the surface, the Azores High, a high-pressure system lingering over the islands, meets the same Gulf Stream waters, bestowing upon the islands their subtropical climate. How long will it last if the stream slows or stalls, as some scientists predict in this century? And what will it mean for the islands and their people? No one has yet determined the true impact of sea level rise on the islands, although scientists speculate Graziosa will be underwater while Santa Maria keeps rising. But consensus is clear. More future coastal protection measures will be needed, and possibly some relocation of coastal communities. São Roque, Vila Franca do Campo, and Ribeira Grande, among them on São Miguel. Winters and summers will be wetter, with increasing ascent of moist air over the island's terrain, and a small increase in temperature in the region. Although the islands are shielded from more drastic temperature increases, such as the ones projected for mainland Portugal. Basically, we're looking at more summer days and more tropical nights. Still, wherever I go on the islands, I open my After Ice app and see what's projected if all the Earth's ice melts. Will this place or that be underwater, even if beyond my life expectancy? In early October 2019, Hurricane Lorenzo became the easternmost Category 5 hurricane on record, skirting the western Azores and producing the strongest winds for a tropical cyclone there in 20 years. Flores and Corfu endured the worst of the winds, with a maximum gust of 163 kilometers per hour, 101 miles per hour, on Corfu before Lorenzo raced towards Ireland and the UK. 15-meter waves hit the islands, leaving 53 people homeless and damaging the docks at Port of Lajes de Flores. Is this the fate of the island's future? Stronger storms reaching further north and east than ever, with the islands in their path, increasing risks of floods, landslides, coastal damage, displacement, and destruction? Thank you.
If I could
Thank you.
make a comment, it's a very good poem, but besides that, a geography lesson.
Well, Scott, I guess I'll have to move from some.
You may have to
could
move
see-
from South
Yeah,
I could see
you,
myself in my.
I am right on.
No, I could see myself in the Escola Industrial in Ponta Delgada.
Mm,
Eu, Tenente Coronel Nassanita was my geography teacher. So
mm.
I was seeing myself on the map, you know, and putting different. Right.
there are for certain rivalries in the Azores, there's some that they some places that they would like to see underwater. The typical island rivalry, right, from Vamberto between a couple of the islands. But anyway, we'll come back to it's a wonderful poem.
Flores and Corvo are on the American plate. So they will
Right,
move
that's right.
closer to America.
They'll
In a
move
few
closer to
thousand years, they'll
America.
be in Boston.
They'll be-
Well, indeed. And so we're going to go back around, but a little bit different now. And but now that Jose mentioned Flores and Corvo, you know, there's this wonderful tale of a couple of things about Flores, and of course, as you know, Monchique, that rock there, that islet there, is the most western point of all of the European continent, and not in mainland Portugal, as some people have said. And so the other day we had one of our events for PBBI, and Professor Carlos Amaral from the University of the Azores was talking about the Azorean connection with Americas. And he was talking when he went to the Azores, and he went to the Azores to Flores when he was doing some research in his first year's teaching. And a gentleman took him around the island and pointed to Monchique and said, that's where America begins. That's where America begins. You know, America's right there. And there's this wonderful thought that, of course, that's Pedro da Silveira used to talk in some of the evenings that Vamberto and Vamberto spent a lot more time with him than I did, but the few of them that I was privileged to spend with him, he would say that folks, when in early times in 20th century, end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, when some of the ships would go in that direction, either whether going or coming from Europe, and people would see a few lights, the Florentines would say, the lights are on in America. Look, we can see lights on America. So there's always been this closeness to America from all of the Azores, but especially from Flores. So we'll start with Elaine this time, if you don't mind, Elaine, and we'll go around about a little bit different. So our second poem.
Okay, this one is called Pedras Negrege. We Picorotos believed the first colonists to suggest that we could protect the vines with lava stones. Our tools were hands, planting seeds. Our tools were arms and backs, hauling stones of black basalt. Our tools were tools, metal and wood clanging against hardened lava. Our tools were determination not to die. Our tools were dreams of making home, a belief so firm it grew longer and longer. Our coral vineyards now, so vast they could stretch around the world twice in a protective embrace. We made this together, stone by stone. So vast it is now treasured as world heritage. I wrap my hand around the dark basalt, my fingers embracing its shape until I feel its protection inside me. We Picorotos are called the strong ones. We are the only islanders to make a fortification this extensive. Perhaps we needed it most.
Oh, lovely. Yes, very, very well. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. We can feel Piku, that's for sure. Yes, with that poem. And we'll go to Logan.
This next poem, I'll tell you since you can't see it, is a prose poem, or a prosema, as I've come to call it in Portuguese. Thanks to Onésimo Almeida, who taught me the term. The heart of the Portuguese, and more specifically to us, the Azorean diasporic experience is often the traditions and the rituals that we carry with us in our daily lives here in the U.S. One of the aspects that I enjoy most about living in a community with such deeply rooted Azorean culture are the idiosyncrasies and the simple pleasures that oftentimes may either go unnoticed or underappreciated because of how normalized they've become in our lives. So one day I decided to embark on this mission of capturing the obvious. I wanted to take the most glaringly Azorean American things that define my cultural experience on the East Coast in cities like Fall River, where the poem takes place. And I wanted to tap into the gold mine of experience that hides in plain sight. So this poem is one such account of something I have a very fond memory of, and one of the most Azorean things that one can do in Fall River, which is buying massa sovada, or Portuguese sweetbread, as we call it in English. So this poem is titled "Rituals of the 10th Island." With a clink and a counterclockwise twist of a latch, the double doors swing wide and open their arms to the outside air. Instantly, the fragrance of massa sovada, building up for hours, collides with the crisp November breeze, twisting and turning its way for blocks, beckoning to passersby, crawling its way up their noses and tugging them in the direction of its origin. A sacred zone only viewed at a glance from the purchasing counter, whose entry is only permitted to a select few who possess the skills bestowed upon them by generations of their predecessors, and who will selectively pass them down to those whom they determine contain within them the estudianidad necessary to carry the weight of this cultural responsibility. Outside, a quietness only felt at a specific hour permeates the dormant coastal city. An hour where the crickets have exhausted their calls and the worms still relish in their night-covered refuge from even the earliest of early birds. A quietness so deep that if you listen closely enough, you can hear the moon falling to the sea and begin her brief repose. But while she still caresses the city with her placid blanket of luminescence, and only a trace of the sun's peach hue peeks up over the horizon and glimpses at his reflection in the still mirror of a river not yet stirred up by even the earliest of early bird fishermen. The day runs full speed ahead and the lines form quickly at Barcelos Bakery, as Saturday morning is the only acceptable time to avail this delicacy. Any time other than this, although acceptable, is undeniably subpar. Customer after customer approaches the counter, all with one thing on their mind: the moisture of the masa that exceeds its capacity and seeps slowly through the porous paper bag that cradles it, and the warmth that comes from the brevity of its existence. A warmth that blankets the hands on a brisk New England winter morning and comforts the soul as it is washed down with a fresh espresso. From a shiny metal machine, a firm jet of water hits the freshly emptied xícara, and a cloud of mist momentarily fills the air. Maizum, and the ritual repeats.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. That is certainly a prosema in all aspects, as Onesime would call it. And Lara.
This second poem I'm going to read back to the Azorean Sea, the ocean again, of the Azores, is my great-grandmother, my Pico great-grandmother, Maria Francisco Cabral. And I had the pleasure of living with her and my grandmother when I was younger for a while. And she never went back to the Azores. She was a mail order bride. And she cried a lot because she missed the Azores even into her 90s. And I went back for her, but it's not the same, I suppose. This is about her. It's called Bound. I found a ship bound for the old country so I could travel back to a past I never lived, to the life of my great grandmother, the woman who started my story. I twisted her ring on my finger and made a wish. At the altar, I kneeled for prayer and host, asked for the body and blood, asked for the resurrection of her body. I wanted her whole again so we could find our way back together. Crocheted into the night, my Basavo talked to me in my language that she couldn't understand. She told me she wanted to go home. A ghost ship docked. It sat silent in the black water and waited for us to board. Her body merged with mine. We returned. The island she remembered was dressed in crags and calderas. She said to me in broken English that when the lava stopped boiling, fish came to the shore and begged to be caught. Her hand filled with sky. Breakers flowered on the beach. Stones showed their frowning faces. She helped me understand the waves, close and far, showed me how to pass through air, pass through water, enter salt. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. José Raposo.
Okay. The next poem that I wrote was thinking of what Portugal was centuries ago. Our caravels and our navigators reached places thousands of miles away and not known. I feel that Portugal has an obligation to maintain relations with those countries, people that speak our language, and even help whenever possible. The dream of Bartolomé de Gusmão and the adventure of Gal Coutinho and Sacadura Cabral are the reality of the plains of today. Therefore, Portugal crossed the air, space, and unite all the people and the countries that with love speak the language of Camões. I believe that if the space between Earth and the moon were an ocean, the first spaceship would have been a Portuguese caravel. And here goes the poem. I'd like to say something. It is very hard for me to write a poem that does not rhyme. Because my parents had a little corner store in the tavern, and there were cantigas of Zafir almost every night. So, but when someone challenges me to do something, I'm going to do it. So that's why I have some poems that they rhyme here and there, but this one rhymes in all the quatrains. And it came of a discussion. I had one of the Portuguese councils here in San Francisco and thinking about what Portugal was. Portugal, go back to the sea, set sail, ride the waves, and show that you can still be a great land of braves. Go touch every nation where your flag flew before. Give them the inspiration and much, much more. Where your language is spoken, even if you feel the pain, for your promise not to be broken, go back to the sea again. Go sail the 7 seas, while sailing, sing aloud. Where there is a Portuguese, Portugal should be proud.
Good. Muito bem, sim senhor. And our Sam Pereira will end the session.
Okay, thank you, Dinesh. This second poem that I want to read is dedicated to Dinesh. And the reason for that, I suppose, is we both have I suppose anybody who is Portuguese has a more than just a passing acquaintance with Fernando Pessoa.
Yeah.
So over the years, I've gotten more and more familiar with and been fascinated by Fernando Pessoa. So much so that in recent poems, and this one is one of those, I tend to bring him along. He becomes part of my surroundings. He becomes an acquaintance, a friend, and the same is true in this poem. It's called Pessoa Winced. And I'm putting him in situations where he probably would not be, but too bad. Pessoa's out in the manure looking for mushrooms. I told him the guests would be arriving soon and that they'd be expecting one or two of his stories before the lamb and cabbage got served. Pessoa winced, not at the idea of that particular meat and vegetable on a weeknight, but at the apparent reality of guests expecting to be entertained during these troubling times. I'll go, Pessoa grumbled on his way to the fields. Later, under candlelight, holding a glass of port in his hand, he'd tell them how mushrooms had invaded the country overnight, how everyone became hooked on putting fungi on top of their meats. Even the lamb seemed infested. The cabbage, not so much. They loved when Pessoa told stories. They'd go home half drunk, trying to focus on the road and the stars. Pessoa knew this and smiled. How uncommon it was for his vengeance to have won so easily in the end. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you all. We're going to start our, thank you all for sharing your poems. We'll have a little bit of a conversation if you're up for it for a few more minutes, I hope. And Vamberto, first and foremost, what did you think of all the poems? Give us your give us your critical view. You know, they're used to you writing about them.
Sam, I have to respond to Sam's great poems. And the fact that he said that not all of his poems call upon its Portuguese ancestry, but that's perfectly normal. Your American writers, who actually, in some of your works, you belong to both literatures, even though you write in English. I've been fighting this idea for quite a while in the Azores, which is Portuguese or Luso descendants are part of us. Their literature is part of our literature. And they bring to us something that has been forgotten by the new generations, who seem to now be born with a cell phone and read nothing. You bring in the memories of your families, your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, a forgotten Azores and part of our history, which is very important, and that provoked immigration first to Brazil and in a few years to the United States and then to Canada. Already in the 20th century, in this case in the 50s. But I think your poems have almost a Whitman quality, and they show that you, and when you mentioned Pessoa, you have multitudes within your poetry, within yourself as a poet. And it doesn't matter to me personally whether you are writing about your Portuguese ancestry or any other theme that you choose. And it's only natural that you choose other themes, and you're not obligated to always refer to your historical past. About Pessoa, a few people know this. Pessoa is one of those unfortunate poets that are more talked about than read. Few people know that his mother was from the Azores, from Terceira.
Yes, Terceira.
Yes. And then at the age, yes, well, I had to say that. There's nobody there's only one person from San Miguel hearing me. He went to visit, he was sent to visit his grandmother in Angra do region. He was so bored at the age of 14 that he invented some of his first fictional heteronyms. He was so bored that he wrote a whole fictional newspaper with local, regional, national, and international news. And the editor-in-chief was named Dr. Pancracio. I've been fighting for a courageous editor or publisher, as we say in America, to publish this newspaper. For the rest of you, Scott knows what I think of his poetry. I have 2 essays coming out in the 6th volume about him, about 2 of his books. And I think it's almost, I used to tell my students back in America in the 70s and 80s, I knew that there had been writing since the beginning of our immigration to the United States, including to California. But I used to tell them way up into the 80s that I don't understand why we are the only minority that doesn't have a literature that looks at America in its own way and according to its origins. Well, I was mistaken. In the 1990s, things broke out, and Sam was already publishing at that time, obviously, but not many more people were publishing in English and recalling a whole history, a whole ancestral history. In the 90s, this changed. We now have a group of writers and poets in America that were scattered throughout the country. Even Karl Matus, for example, is in Chicago. Who would think an Azorean American would be in Chicago. But their poetry is first quality. And when I argue with my, because it's not accepted by all that literature written in English can be also Portuguese, they have a different opinion about Levi's and American cigarettes. And I argue that, well, translate them and you will hear your voice. All you have to do is translate them, and you hear their voices as one of ours. I don't have, fortunately for me, I don't have that problem. I've been here as an adult. I went to America at the age of 13, had 1 year of high school here. And then I went to primary school, and my first friend in California is a man you all know called Anthony Barcelos, who was in eighth grade with me. So America has always been with me. There isn't a single day which I don't think about America. First of all, I have all of my family, practically all of my family there. And I lived there for 27 years, and I don't have one bad memory. Obviously, not counting personal setbacks once in a while. I don't have a single bad memory about America, and I've always been an omnivorous reader of American literature in general. And I began reading, for example, I was going through an identity crisis in the university. Who am I? I was very politicized at a young age. And I tried to forget Portugal because it was ruled by a fascist regime. My happiest day in America was April 26th, 1974. I
Mm.
was waiting at the bus stop. And while waiting at the bus stop, I put a coin in a box and took the LA Times, but did not look at them, put them under my books. Then I sat on a bus that would take me to Cal State Fullerton. And in a bus, I lifted the books and right on the front page, coup d'etat in Lisbon.
Mm.
And I saw a man that seemed to me to come out of the 19th century in a Hollywood movie. And that was Spindler with his monocle. My return home began that day, except that I went on to become a high school teacher for 14 years. But as Denise very well knows, I had rejected community. I had rejected my home country, home islands. I didn't want anything to have to do with them. But after that day, I wanted everything to do with them. And I would soon come back. But this is just to say that to me, I'm a hybrid, culturally speaking, and I'm very proud of that. America has always been with me. And I think it's, well, I don't believe in miracles, but I think it's astounding that such a big group of Portuguese American writers, and also in Canada, I have reviewed Eric Vasconcelos and reviewed Anthony de Sá, actually presented his book here in São Miguel, and now I have to read Elaine. To me, it's astounding that you could write about anything you want, even science fiction. It would be perfectly natural. But no, you choose to, once in a while, remember what your ancestors in the United States remembered about the islands. And yes, you belong to two national literatures now. And the proof is that some of these writers have been published in Lisbon with some success. Obviously, there are still unknown names until the disquiet event began taking place in Lisbon. We are still, by the way, Sam, the title of your poem, Amanhã, would be a perfect slogan for both the national and regional governments. Every time we ask them a question, that's the answer. Amanhã. As to the rest of you, all I can say is thank you for giving us such a pleasure in reading you, because reading should be a pleasure. I'm not the first one to say it. This comes from, as you know, a French writer, Roland Barthes, the pleasure of the text. And that's what I feel when I read you. Unfortunately, none of us can read everything you would want to. But after writing for the Adventists for about 14 years, I began doing, they asked me at one point to do literary criticism. And they asked me to do specifically to explain to the Lisbon readers what was the Azorean literature, which was very controversial at that time. And now once in a while I publish. I no longer publish for just one newspaper. I publish in various magazines once in a while. And I do call attention to some of the Portuguese and Canadian writers that they should be translating. And fortunately, something very unusual is happening now with the press at US Mass and Brown University, is that they have a protocol with a major publisher in the Azores here in São Miguel, in which the books published in English there can be published here with a different cover, obviously the same content. This came about when we had tremendous tourists coming to the island, and they always ask for books in English. Obviously, from the rest of Europe, most people speak English, in Portugal too. They would always ask the booksellers, do you have anything about the Azores in English? And so I think this is very important. And even the existence of our university, which just commemorated for 45 years of existence, also created a whole mass of readers in English. I actually had students who prefer to read books in English than Portuguese. I don't make any judgments on that. But I used to teach some Portuguese, give them some Portuguese American texts to read, and I'm very devoted to this. But I also write about Azorean writers from here, first generation writers from the United States, continental writers, and once in a while I took my bachelor's degree, as you say there, in Latin American studies. So Brazilian literature has always been very important to me, particularly the Northeastern literature, because of their connections to us. And they are in part responsible for literary modernism in Portugal, something that Pessoa probably would also admit to there. And he was, of course, in South Africa for many years, and he almost threw a coin up to see if he would write in Portuguese or in English. And to get some of my most petulant friends mad is to say that Fernando Pessoa was an immigrant par excellence. He had he had no country, and he had the whole world within him. He's, of course, he was very influenced by Walt Whitman, and so I'm very proud of you, because you belong to one of the greatest European literatures, and that's true even today. We have a great number of very good writers, both men and women, and the same thing in the United States. So you've come to enrich us with your literature in any genre, be poetry or prose in any of its forms. And I try to keep my eyes as open as possible to what is coming out of America, but it's not always possible to keep up with everything. But there's also increased interest in Portuguese American writer, even at the national level. Even in various universities, the University of Lisbon, for example, the University of Aveiro, has people who are very interested in Portuguese American writing. And although I've never participated, I was invited to participate in the first Disquiet, but I said that I would go only if they invited a resident poet or novelist to the event, and they said we can't bring anybody. So I said I can't go either, because Disquiet is financed by FLAD, and FLAD is financed by the American Air Base at Lages. So if you don't have enough money for us here, now they do, they are contributing a little bit to the university and to various projects. And I'm very glad that they've been very supportive of Portuguese American communities. So to publish your books, don't forget that they are there. They do have the money. And Denise works very closely with them. I never had to, but it's very important that your books reach here in any language, whether in translation or in the original language, and be present in our bookstores. The Azores has a very small population, as you know, approximately a little over 240,000 people. San Miguel has more than half of the population, and we have 3 full bookstores, and books are now sold in supermarkets and everywhere here. So people do read. And before the pandemic, we had literary events. Scott knows this very well, and Denise knows this very well. I think Lara and Jose knows this very well. We had literary events every single week, from book launchings to conferences, to reading sessions. And I've always wanted you included in those events, which I hope will return soon. I went to a book launching last week that allowed us to be present, physically present, obviously maintaining the distance. But it was very nice to return, to see your literary friends, and to see that people still very value literature very much. Harold Bloom, as you know, died not too long ago, was a very controversial essayist, once said that literary criticism was memory. All literature is memory. And it is that perpetuates our identity, but in a positive manner. One of the problems in the United States today and in Europe, for the first time, by the way, since the Portuguese Revolution in '74, we do have a far-right political party represented in the National Assembly, of the Assembly of the Republic, as we call it here, and with 2 members in the regional assembly. So we're living very difficult times, and only through literature can we get to the other, can we get to know the other. Literature in any of its forms changes your ideas about people you don't know personally. I have a writer friend who has traveled all over the world, including to Mongolia. And he told me stories about his experience in Mongolia, where it was still Soviet or communist, governed by China, I guess. I don't remember if it was the Soviet Union or China, but I think it was China. Anyway, it was still a communist land. And the friendliness with which they accepted him, and they were unable to communicate through language. And so I very much believe that we shouldn't press identity too far, not tolerate blind nationalism. But as José had a poem that led me to this, there's a movement in Portugal that right now that wants to destroy knock it down totally, the monument to the discoveries. I think, as I'm a socialist myself, I think that's the dumbest thing that I've ever heard of, because to them it signifies slave trade, colonialism, all of that, as if Portugal was not living at a time when all of these things were happening in many other European countries. And they also forget that the first globalization was created by Portugal. There's one of these days, and as you know where I live, I can't swim, but one of the things that happen even today, we get up in the morning, it's summertime. In the afternoon, it gives an autumn signal. And now at night, it's wintertime. So it's a very, it varies very much the way in which we live. But these are also the factors that have helped to create so many great Azorean writers. You take the greatest Azorean writers out of national literature, and it will become very poor. Well, not very poor, but it will definitely just think this, if you took American Southern literature away from American literature, you know what would be left, the New England vision of America, or take the Jewish American writers out and Afro-American writers out, everybody. And here in Portugal, we are trying to be very inclusive, fortunately. Many people fear that our entrance in Europe would make us forget America. No, America is very present among us. And now in a very physical way, by the way, with products from America being available in Portuguese stores and television. Of course, we all have American stations. I don't have, I'd like to have Fox for comic relief, but I don't. Instead, I have CNN and Sky News from England, which is different from its Fox's sister station, but they're a lot calmer tremendously. They are delivered easily by booksellers on that.
The others, or we'd heard their names, or what have you, and just getting together like this and sharing our work is pretty profound experience for me. So I think the more we can do that, bringing together the entire Azores writing community, as it were, I think we'll find that cross-pollination will happen, and we'll start sharing ideas and translating each other's books and what have you. So,
Elaine, we need a woman president for the government of the Azores. The Azores has never had a lady president, so it's your turn.
All right. Well, I'm very interested building on Scott's poetry, actually, in sustainable tourism. So when I was in Ponta Delgada, we had 4 or 5 cruise ships a week. People couldn't get around the island at all, and who lived there, they couldn't go to the miradores to write their poetry because the roads were blocked with tourists who can't drive on the Azores roads. So, and then I heard from the consul, U.S. consul, that the Azores was scheduled to have double the tourism the next year. So we were kind of about to lose the Azores over tourism, in my view. And so if I were president, I would want to put in green infrastructure. So here in British Columbia, we can now fly inter-island using sustainable flights with Horizon Air. And so I think the Azores, I think one of the islands, was it Terceira, became completely off the grid, or is, everyone's investing in geothermal, etc. So I would like to see the growth of real sustainable tourism, because we miss each other. We want to go back and forth, but the Azores was about to be completely overrun. The New York Times said it was the place to go. It was on the cover of, what is that really famous travel magazine?
Condé Nast.
Yes,
yeah,
thank
Condé
you,
Nast
Condé
Traveler.
Nast. Yeah,
It seemed like everybody was doing those articles, and
yeah.
There's only one small well, it depends who we talk to, but there is one small advantage to all the cruise ships, which is, according to what José Ernesto, when it was in front of Vamberto, what José Ernesto, the owner of Letras Lavadas, told me when I said, why are you publishing the new Azorean collection that's being translated to English? Okay, it's being published here, as you know, by Tegas Press, and with 2 books per year. Scott is working on 1 translation, and I asked him, why are you publishing it in Ponta Delgada in English? I mean, and he said, cruise ships. He said, believe it or not, people, it's an older crowd, especially those that make that, because it's not your traditional 7-day, fun in the sun type of thing. It's those transatlantic, and it's an older crowd that goes on them. And he said that they would go into his bookstore and they want books about in English. They want books, whether it be poetry, whether it be fiction, whether it be whatever, but they want it in English, because even though some of them are Dutch or whatever, but they all read English. And so that is the reason why he agreed to publish, and he's doing it out of his good, free-spirited and adventurous way that man is. It's not with any government help. Any government's help is coming to this side. It's not going over there. And and he is publishing the 2 or 3 or whatever Tegas publishes in translation. He's doing the same thing. He's publishing him there in Ponta Delgada and reaching out. So there is that positive of maybe a few of them discovering our Azorean literature. Sam, if you were president of the Azores, not president of the United States, because I know what you would do if you were president of the United States, we can only read, the poem of with Fernando Pessoa and the Puff Pastry Superstation, not to know what you would be doing if you were president of the United States. But if you were president of the government of the Azores, how do we bring this together?
If it was possible, I would make Fernando Pessoa president, and I lead. Look, all of these answers are intriguing. They're fascinating. Anything I would say would be, sort of disingenuous. I'm learning an awful lot about the comings and goings from both places on this very device or devices that we're using right now. It's been quite remarkable, the things that we learn about each other just by pushing a button and looking at a screen. That's probably not ideal, but it does work. Some of the stuff that's being talked about here is costly to the point of being probably prohibitive. It's a nice dream, and maybe one day people run into each other and all of that stuff happens. But in the meantime, we have this. We can share each other's ideas and literature, and for right now, I think that's pretty good.
Indeed, yeah.
It's not profound, but that's all I've got.
But we have to. No, it is. It is because we have to be cognizant, of course, of costs. Jose, any thoughts?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do, we have to unite ourselves. I have a medal. I'm not showing this because of the medal, okay? That I got from the Academia Pan-Americana de Letras e Artes do Rio de Janeiro, no Brazil. I released a book there, and they have this academia, and every year they have a meeting where they release a book of one of the people that belong to the academia. So they wanted me to open one year, and I said, "Oh, please, not in this Portuguese community. No, I'm not going to do it. It will be hard or impossible." But if we have a group, like we have 9 people here, if we unite, we can do something. And then we have a force which the Portuguese government or the Azorean government, hey, there is this group of people there, what can we do for them to come here? And again, as I showed before, my book Entangled, that I decided to put the Sad Cidade and the Golden Gate Bridge on top of it, was the only book that I had a profit. And why? I had a dry cleaning store. I had 2,500 customers. Some of my customers were famous people like Annie Lamont, the author of Bird by Bird, Plan B and Traveling Mercies. She was a customer of mine. Jack Cornfield, a famous monk. And I had customers that bought the book because I published the book. And I had a lady actually from San Joaquin Valley, Denise. She advanced me $400 for me to publish 20 books for her to give for Christmas to her friends.
Yeah, we can be creative and form all kinds of things, I think. But I going back to what Sam said, it would be interesting even after the pandemic to continue these kinds of events here virtually, because we cannot always whether it be because of economics or even time constraints. I'm teaching 4 classes in one day, and I couldn't be doing it if it wasn't on Zoom because of traveling from here to
Sure.
Fresno, which is a 49-minute drive. So it does have its advantages. Anyway, we need to come to an end. We went over about a half hour. That's okay. Zoom didn't cut us off, but I want to thank all of you for participating. We have lots of ideas. I jotted down some of these. I think that we can come forth with a platform. I think that one of the things that we'd like to do at PBBI is indeed a writers' conference for focusing on those who are of Portuguese background, and we'll concentrate on the entire U.S., but we'll probably try to concentrate on the West Coast first. And when I mean the West Coast, include British Columbia, because we know what it's we know what it's like to be left behind in California in a lot of ways when it talks to when it encompasses the Azores, and it's not done for any reason other than we are a long way from the Azores. The same thing for British Columbia, and the same thing for Hawaii. So I think there's a lot that we can motivate ourselves by getting involved. I want to thank you all for your time. I want to thank you all for your wisdom, for your poetry. Thanks for taking the time to read it. Thanks for going an extra almost 40 minutes than we had planned. And hopefully we'll continue doing this. And take care. Have a wonderful World Poetry Day. Thanks to all the people who joined us. Thanks to all of you who are on social media. Take care. We'll see you next time, and stay safe, please. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
It was nice to see you, Vamberto.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.